My family album. Part 1. The tea set in front of me shakes, like it can see the first time my mother stepped into my father's house and poured tea, holding her fear in her fingers. Her hands know more than she chooses to tell, more than her veins can burst into a tear for, more than she thinks they show. Somebody once told her she looks like the water. When she was young, when she looked and saw her face in it, her eyes exactly water, her cheeks exactly water, her hands exactly shaken waters. Part 2. My sister and I have grown up getting our photographs clicked under the Narangi tree. She stands beneath it, her eyes glinting, her teeth crooked, her baby sweater teasing the Narangi that bends to merge with it. 6 years later, I stand outside and almost pose like her. Inside, the grandfather clock tells the passage of time. Part 3. Death is not an event. It's not a one-time end to constant breathing or a thing that comes and then slowly leaves. My grandfather stands at one end of the garden. The grass around him slowly bends in sadness, falling at his feet. He was always the one who cared for it. Even on court days and evenings with clients lined outside, which is not to say that my grandmother didn't. Which is not to say that the flowers did not tear up on seeing her ashes. My grandfather stands at one end of the garden. The children have crowded around, they cannot find strength to keep themselves from falling. The friends have parked their cars inside, and the cousins have flown in, navigating their way home. The pundit begins reading out the prayers. There's a mutual understanding of no more sound than this. The young man sitting next to him, maybe his son, maybe the only next boy in the family, will slowly understand what all of this means. Meanwhile, my grandfather melts in his chair, next to a portrait of my grandmother, his eyes swollen, above wrinkles, above the time that often lied to him as much as it told him the truth. He does not want to understand what all of this means. Here's a new world created for him, just like that. The sun trickling down the evening sky, collecting flowers today, and the birds sitting silently on their legs, learning the language that is most common today. The summer will slowly come to remind him of her hands, how easily they melted into his, like bodies in mirrors. And the winter will remind him of homes they built and found in each other. I could not tell spring from autumn as a kid, but I'm learning to see what blooming and shedding can do to a life. We will pack our bags and leave the city tomorrow. We will talk, my grandfather and I, and weeks later, like always, he'll call me again. Like always, he'll ask me if I'm happy. I will not have the strength to ask him back. Part 4. My family album lies in our bathroom. The sound of the shower cap moving is always enough to ring over the magic of photographs curling. No one gets to hear the music outside. Our hands cup our ears like headphones. and the water runs to hide beneath the drains. My sister's 30 now. She has learned to leave her 13-year-old self behind. But some days she wishes to hold her back. Her dresses frill inside. Her teeth are pushed back through a thin wire scraping her mouth. She sings. Her words are a cello. Her voice is my mouth organ. I'm imitating her like a mirror. Our parents have left me a piano, a tool book to read music, but I keep practicing the notes that she plays. I do not want to learn any other. My mother watches me from a photograph. There are too many meals we have cooked together, and when we sit down for dinner tonight, spinach and macaroni, cheese grated and baked, crumbs falling delicately over her apron, she will laugh softly, and I'll watch my mother from the photograph again. Thank you. That was those were 4 poems that I'd written as part of a series called My Family Album. Um, I hope you all enjoyed it. So, performance poetry has actually existed in different ways all across the world. If you actually look at India, also there have been poetry. There has been poetry which is performed on stages. You know, if you look at plays, also within the plays, there have been poetic verses that have been a part of those plays. You know, then there's also a lot of folk poetry that exists in India. So it has existed in performative practices of poetry have existed throughout the world. Um, Slam poetry actually started sometime in 1984 in the US, which was basically where you know, this guy came and he decided that he was too bored to watch poets performing in elite spaces. You know, you are invited only through an invitation. You can't have access to poetry. So he started performing poems in a jazz bar, and he came along, and then there were other people who joined him. So that's how slam poetry started. It's a competition where people perform their poems, and but I mean, performance poetry has existed in throughout the world. You know, in Brazil, in Canada, in the UK, in different ways in folk practices. But in India, actually, spoken word poetry came about because of thanks to YouTube. You know, you get to actually have access to performances that have happened in the past. So that's how you come to know. And then there are, in I think sometime around 2012, 13, these small groups were coming with their own performances, and airplane poetry movement was also a part of it. So that's when we decided to start taking workshops and start doing performances also. So yeah. So the only way it's different from paper, from poetry that's written on paper, is that it's performed on stage. So it's not just literary arts; it's a combination of literary and performance arts. You can actually perform it on stage. Yeah.